The Israeli Defense Force says it will punish the soldiers that were photographed destroying this statue of Jesus Christ by taking a sledgehammer to the head. The image, quite unsurprisingly, prompted outrage online. Now, the IDF responded saying, we found this person and the people around him, and that this soldier's conduct is wholly inconsistent with the values expected of its troops. Well, Israel supporters like to tell us that Israel has the most moral army in the world. They say, look, yes, they bomb schools and hospitals, but they tell them before they're going to do it. They did not on April 8th when they bombed civilian apartments in Beirut, but most of the time they do, and they minimize civilian deaths. Here is Mike Huckabee recently telling Tucker Carlson that the IDF just doesn't get enough credit for how high their morals are. Watch.
You are not giving Israel credit for having done everything they possibly could to a level that, quite frankly, in urban warfare, there has never been a war that has been documented.
Criticize Israel, but it's a foreign country, and I would much rather criticize a foreign country than my own.
Feel free to do that. They can handle it.
But you pivoted against our country by saying
I didn't.
Israel's done a better job than our military has.
I simply gave you the illustration, and I helped you understand that Israel goes to lengths that no other country, including ours, goes to in the middle of an urban war, and yet Israel ended up with fewer civilian deaths in an urban war than any urban war of record.
You said you didn't know how many civilian deaths there were, so how can you say that?
If you took Gaza's numbers, Hamas's numbers,
you said you don't know what the numbers are.
Okay, so he says he doesn't believe the death numbers, but he knows that they're far less than what the U.S. perpetrated in Afghanistan, which is not true. It's just unequivocally a lie. It's nonsense. You can't really engage with it, but it is indicative of this propaganda that we must reject the idea that Israel and the U.S., for that matter, both the aggressors in the war with Iran, are the moral army. Now, of course, I can show you examples until the cows come home of the IDF over the last few years, executing medics, double tap bombing raids on hospitals and schools, firing on food lines. Most recently, the horrific attack of April 8th on Beirut. But don't take my word for it. Take the word of former IDF soldiers. This piece came out recently in Haaretz, and it is harrowing reading. It is reporting that the IDF soldiers have an increasing number of what they call moral injuries after what they perpetrated in Gaza. It's not what they witnessed. It's not like PTSD, whereas PTSD is a diagnosis that was created for Vietnam vets who had witnessed atrocities. Moral injury is trauma caused by one's own actions. Now, here is how this professor at the University of Haifa put it. It says, moral injury happens due to exposure to incidents that are perceived as a fundamental violation of basic moral values of oneself or of others, typically involves feelings of guilt, shame, rage, disgust, alienation, loss of faith, breakdown in identity, meaning, and a sense of humanity. So these IDF soldiers told Haaretz specifically about what haunts them. Here is one man telling this story, saying he was out on this Gaza road. He saw some suspicious figures. He says, I was firing like a madman, like they teach you in basic training. So basic IDF training is basically go batshit crazy with your gun. That's what he's implying here. He says, when we got to our destination, I realized these weren't terrorists. It was just an old guy and 3 boys, maybe teenagers. Not one of them was armed, but their bodies were riddled with bullets, organs pouring out. I'd never seen anything like that up close. He says, I remember the silence. Nobody uttered a word. Then the battalion commander came over with his people, and one spat on the bodies and yelled, this is what happens to anyone who messes with Israel, you sons of bitches. I was in shock and I kept quiet, I guess just because I'm a gutless loser, a gutless coward. So this story is just chock full, this article, with stories like this from the IDF soldiers' own mouth. One is a guy who said, we just planned these drone strikes on places where we knew children were, and then just go out for a burger in a, trendy part of town in Tel Aviv. Another reservist says he saw civilians fired upon and then buried with bulldozers so the dogs don't eat them. Another saw a Palestinian tied up in the middle of the night, shivering and cold, while an IDF soldier just peed on him. Another describes looting Palestinian homes. And now they cannot live with themselves. Many of them, in fact, don't. We have seen increasingly reports of IDF soldiers killing themselves, suicide rates sky high. This man in the Haaretz article says he thinks about suicide all the time, but he just doesn't do it because he promised his mother he wouldn't. So his mother is keeping a constant watchful eye on her son. Imagine this, because she knows what horror he had witnessed. The IDF does not formally recognize moral injury or have programs in place for it. How could they? They'd have to accept blame for what they'd sent these young people to do. They only began tracking suicides in 2024. Now, here's what one IDF mental health officer reservist said. It's pretty obvious that it's a socio-political statement being made here. After all, if we recognize that many soldiers are suffering from moral injuries, how does this fit with the cliche about the most moral army in the world? So instead, they choose a phrase that shifts responsibility to the soldier, as if there's a problem with his identity rather than the actions that his leaders sent him to perform. So again, imagine this. Oh, you shot someone's hand off and they bled to death while going and waiting for food. It was someone's grandma, and you can't take that?